I'm Vance Bastian here with my co-host S.A. Baz Collins for this week's Written on the Edge Season 9, Episode 9 interview. We'll be talking with Curtis Chin and discussing his book. So let's get to know our guest. A co-founder of the Asian American Writers Workshop in New York City, Curtis Chin served as the nonprofit's first executive director. He went on to write for network and cable television before transitioning to social justice documentaries. Chin has screened his films at over 600 venues in 20 countries. He has written for CNN, Bon Appetit, the Detroit Free Press, and the Emancipator Boston Globe. A graduate of the University of Michigan, Chin has received awards from ABC, Disney Television, New York Foundation for the Arts, National Endowment for the Arts, and more. His memoir, Everything I Learned in a Chinese Restaurant, will be published by Little Brown, or was published by Little Brown in the fall of 2023, and his essay in Bon Appetit was just selected for Best Food Writing in America 2023. Curtis, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Just one slight clarification. It's
Sure.
the national champion, University of Michigan.
Oh, my apologies. Thank you for fixing that. So you're a busy guy.
Why when do you sleep?
I grew up working in a Chinese restaurant. We worked 80 hours a week, 40 hours part-time.
Fair. But where was the passion to write about that? Where did that come from?
About the restaurant itself?
Yeah, or just to write the memoir.
Well, I mean, it started from a sad note, actually. I mean, my journey as a writer, I was having a great time in Los Angeles, working in Hollywood. And then sadly, my parents were in a car accident back in Detroit, and my dad passed away. I was forced to move back home. And that's also, at first I started doing social justice documentaries. And along that line, as I was thinking more about my own childhood, my hometown, my family, the memoir just sort of came up. I mean, because of that, particularly after after that accident, my whole family left the area, and when my siblings started having kids, I thought it was sad that that next generation would not know anything about our 100-year history in the state of Michigan, and so I really started writing the book for them.
Wow. Mm-hmm. So what should folks know about the book? I mean, where does the memoir start?
So the book, Everything I Learned in a Chinese Restaurant, is about growing up in a Chinese restaurant, and not just any Chinese restaurant, but I like to think of it as the Chinese restaurant in Detroit.
Well, there you go.
Over the course of, here's my stats to back it up. Over the 65 years that we own the restaurant, we sold over 10 million egg rolls.
Wow.
That's a lot of egg rolls. So it's a really, really popular place. But, I grew up in Detroit in the 80s, which is a really tough time period for my hometown. Not only did you have the struggling auto industry, but you had crack cocaine, you had AIDS. I knew 5 people murdered by the time I was 18 years old. But despite that, my parents had this really wonderful Chinese restaurant in the inner city, the red light district. And they were able to raise me and my 5 siblings and give us all the skills and tools necessary to go on with our lives. And so for me, the memoir isn't just about retracing my own journey. It's also a thank you to my parents for giving me and my siblings these wonderful lives, and also a hat tip to my hometown of Detroit, because I think a lot of people still have these misconceptions about the city. And so I wanted to show that, hey, Detroit is still a great place to raise a family.
Mm-hmm. And Detroit's reconstruction in the recent decades, amazing. I mean, it's reinvented itself completely.
Yeah, I'm here right now. I mean, I've been here for a week or so, and just to see the changes is incredible. It's almost unrecognizable, definitely from my own childhood. I mean, obviously, there's a downside sometimes. I mean, there's always that tension. It's great that there are these people who are in some ways returning back to Detroit, like the people from the suburbs, oftentimes the white community, who had really kept their distance from Detroit for the last few decades. Suddenly, this new generation of younger Michiganders are saying, wait, we have this wonderful city that's right in our backyard. Why have we ignored it for all these years? And so now they're coming back. So now the tension, or the things to look out for, is like, how does this new population integrate itself with the people that did stay, the people that never left downtown Detroit? And
without destroying the city's character.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. How
Yeah.
do they re-blend in as opposed to coming in with an attitude of like, oh, we're going to reinvent the city or we're going to save the city or, any of these other, potentially problematic ways of thinking about it, right?
Right.
Right.
So, do you have any anecdotes from the memoir that folks might like to hear?
Oh my God. There's so
Where to
many,
start?
where to
I know.
start?
How do you pick among your favorites?
Well, I mean, the ones that I like to talk about are the ones that I think maybe could be a standalone, short film or a Broadway
Well,
musical.
there you
What a
go.
great way to think about it.
When
Wait,
I
let me
was
get
younger,
Netflix on the line.
get Netflix down the line. Yes, sign the deal now. When I was younger, in my teens, Yul Brynner, who I don't know if everybody knows who he is now, but growing up, he was like a big star. Like
Hmm.
he Oscar winner, Tony winner. He was the star of this musical called The King and I. And when they were touring, they stopped by Detroit and they'd actually called our restaurant and asked if they could host their cast party in our restaurant. And my dad was so excited because, oh my God, it's a Hollywood A-list celebrity coming to our little Chinese restaurant in Detroit. And he'd always had this chip on his shoulder thinking that people didn't respect Chinese restaurants. And so it's like, yes, we could show that we could do a quality job. And so he spent the whole week like doing everything to get the restaurant in shape for this big party, even ordering ice cream, something we never had. Like Yul Brynner got ice cream. I never got ice cream, right? And then when Yul Brynner comes into the restaurant,
Well,
he's
when
like
you do a big play like King and I, then you can get some ice cream.
okay, I want three different flavors though.
Right.
So then he comes in with his whole entourage, right, of people, and the guy's kind of a dick to everybody in the restaurant.
Oh,
My dad in particular. And it was just the epiphany in that chapter is like, you know what? Everybody was spending their whole week idolizing this potential, um, you know, role model, right? This hero. But all along, there was a role model right in front of us, which was my dad,
Yeah.
who was
Yeah.
just being a Chinese waiter, trying to make sure that people had a good time. And, maybe those are the people we should be idolizing in life and not
Yeah.
the celebrities. So
Well,
that's
it just goes to point out, that old adage, you should never meet your heroes, because sometimes they can be crushing. I will say that the one thing I did hear about Yul Brynner is a friend of mine was a stage manager for King and I on the tour, and it was towards the end of his life when he was literally riddled with cancer. And she said she gained a new ounce of respect for professional actors of that era because just before he went on, he would be huddled over in absolute pain. And the moment he heard his cue, he just stood straight up and became the king again. And it was like nothing was bothering him. And she said to see that every night happen was really mind blowing and changing, So, you get an artist who of that caliber, there are things that, you don't want to know about them, but there are things you go, no, but they are
yeah,
dedicated to
there's
their
probably
craft.
that training involved with that,
Yeah.
but the funny thing in twist in like all along, I thought he was actually Asian, but he
right.
He's
actually was
Russian.
not Asian. And so there was a twist of like,
Hmm.
yeah, I was like, oh, yeah.
So,
So that was really interesting to me.
family restaurant, your whole family worked there.
Yeah,
How,
everybody. I grew up in a crowded house of, like I said, my parents, my grandparents, my five siblings, and the occasional cousin, second cousin, or family of Vietnamese refugees that my dad took in. It was
wow.
always a madhouse. And also,
Wow.
also like Detroit didn't have a lot of Chinese people, so we couldn't. It was always we always had to like bring in people from out of town to like try to work for us. And so whenever that happened, they also stayed with us. So it was always really crowded in our house. So.
How did you manage the live together, work together balance?
Well, I think I grew up as a middle child, and I think that really has changed or shaped my perspective on things because people would always come into the restaurant, but they were always looking to talk to somebody else, right? Whether it was my parents, my grandparents, or my older siblings, nobody ever paid attention to me. And so I just oftentimes sat back and observed the world. It gave me an opportunity. If nobody is paying attention to me, I'm going to observe, I'm going to listen, right? I'm going to try to find those openings of where I might fit in. And so I think that made me more aware of the world around me and maybe less self-centered.
Hmm.
So.
Fair. So, were there any hard lessons you learned? I
Firstborn
mean,
kids are always self-centered. My brother's gonna hate me for saying that. Okay, I shouldn't say that.
We
Maybe I
paid
shouldn't
him
say
to
that.
say that.
Okay, okay. I'm not gonna tell.
There, we get you off the hook.
He's not gonna listen to this podcast. Sorry.
Okay, okay.
Get mad at me.
oh,
What did I learn?
yeah.
Yeah. So given the title of the book, Everything I Learned in a Chinese Restaurant, people often ask me, so what did you learn? And I like to share the first lesson, and probably the most important lesson came from my dad in particular. Both my parents, but really my dad. When you're a young kid, oftentimes your parents will say, don't talk to strangers. My parents gave me the exact opposite instructions or advice because my mom didn't have a chance to graduate high school. She had arranged marriage at the age of 17, had to drop out of high school and married this stranger in a foreign country she'd never been to. My dad went to community college for 2 semesters before he had to drop out and work in the family restaurant. So they didn't really know what opportunities existed outside of the four walls of that Chinese restaurant, but they
Mhm.
knew there was this dining room full of people who did. And so anytime my dad met a customer who had an interesting story. It seemed, to be really happy with their life. He'd call all 6 of us kids to run over and barrage them with questions of, what do you do for a living? How did you get your job? How much money do you make? And so this idea of talking to people who are different from you, right?
Mhm.
Not being afraid to ask questions, but more importantly, not being afraid to ask for help when you need it are things that my parents taught me at a very, very young age. And I feel like that's something I've carried with me, this ability to just, kind of connect with people who are different than me.
Hmm.
Right. So, how has the restaurant survived the generations and the changes and all of the stuff that's gone on over the decades?
Well, the restaurant was opened in 1940 and it went
Hmm.
through a lot of changes, struggling, including, the city tearing down the original location to build a freeway. But sadly, when my dad passed away in 2005, we had to sell it. So we haven't been part of the rebirth or the renaissance of Detroit in the last few years. But interestingly, so the building where I grew up in, that location has been empty for the past 20 odd years. But when the building sold this past year, the owners actually went through all the trouble of contacting me in LA, asking me if I would reopen the building. That's how iconic our restaurant was in Detroit. Like that's
Wow.
a long memory. Any city always has a handful of restaurants that people remember.
Yep.
Our restaurant was the one, in Detroit. It was the Chinese restaurant that everybody from the mayor on down to the pimps and prostitute, everybody went. You don't sell 10 million egg rolls unless,
No.
Yeah.
people like
Unless
you.
you're doing something right.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. So, is there anything of the memoir you want folks to know that I didn't think to ask?
I think the main thing is that it's a book that you hopefully will pick up thinking you're just learning about an Asian American family in Detroit, but you really are going to learn about America. I really felt like I tried to do a good job of connecting my family's history with not just the city of Detroit and what was going on then, but also the 80s. There's so many 80s references in the book. It really is a glimpse of where America was at that time period, right?
Right.
And so that was really, really important for me because I feel like, sometimes when you read the stories of minorities or people of color in this community, there's sometimes this feeling like it's a sidebar to the main
Mm.
conversation in America. And I really want to make sure that people understood it's not, it's central. It's just
Hmm.
a different take on it from our unique perspective in the location that we happen to be in. And so if you're not Asian, if you're not gay or lesbian, and you read the book, you should have a really good, strong sense of where, if you were around at that time,
Hmm.
of where you were in these moments. And so that's something that I thought was really important for me to do.
That is really important.
Yeah.
All right. Baz, any questions?
No, I think we're covered there.
All right. Then let's get to our get to know you questions.
All right. Okay. So, in this year of diving deeper, what's your favorite writing snack or drink?
Oh my God. For me, Mike and Ike's, I think.
Oh
Okay.
my God. There's a
Okay.
throwback.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There you go. All
it's
right.
nice. Yeah.
What books did you read growing up?
I actually did not read growing up. I get asked this question a lot, but my answer is that I grew up in a Chinese restaurant. We didn't have any books around at all. And so, well, the only books that we had were the ones left behind by our customers. And there were
Mhm.
basically two categories. One were the Harlequin romances, that the women would leave behind, these single women. And the other one was the Bible. But as a closeted gay Asian Buddhist, I had zero interest in either one of those books. So I just was not one of those kids that read. But what I do say to aspiring writers who come from non-traditional backgrounds, right? Like me, don't be afraid that you didn't read a lot, yeah, as a kid, because you were still probably developing other skills necessary to be a good writer. And like in my case, I feel like I paid attention, I listened,
Right.
I became a human being. Like I have a philosophy on life. And these are things that are almost even more important than how many books you read. Is like what kind of person are you how engaged are you with the world? I think
Right.
those are the more important questions that we should be asking people, in terms of what impacted you in terms of becoming a writer.
All
Right.
right. Well, who has been the biggest supporter of your writing?
Well, God, I have to say my husband. I mean,
Well,
like,
there you go.
yeah, my husband. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think
Nice.
that's a universal thing for a lot of us writers. It's like we feel for them.
Yeah,
All
I'm
right.
I'm kinder now. I used to make him read all my rough drafts and stuff like that, but I've gotten to the point where I do it less so now.
Okay. All right. Well, are you a morning person or a night owl?
I am a night owl, but because I am married to a morning person, I have trained myself to, in some ways, do both, and then take really nice naps in the afternoon.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah.
That's the way to do it. That's the way to do it. All right. What's your favorite hobby outside of writing?
To be honest with you, I don't know if I have one. I really love writing. I love what I do. I mean, I travel around a lot, but that is meeting people, I guess,
Hmm.
right? And that's
Okay.
talking about my book. So I guess meeting people, is that a hobby?
Yeah, well, sure. Being
Yeah.
social. Yeah.
Yeah, I like meeting people.
All right.
Nice.
All right. Well, has writing and publishing a book changed the way you see yourself?
Um, I think that writing a book has been
Or maybe the
great.
memoir, since we're talking about your memoir, has writing the memoir changed the way you see yourself?
I think that writing and publishing this memoir has given me a sense of satisfaction in the sense of, beforehand, I've hopped around a little bit in terms of the genres I've worked in. I've worked professionally as a writer or a creative person, for decades. But they've sort of hopped around. Like I graduated with a poetry writing degree, won big fellowships and stuff like that. But then I switched over to TV writing mostly, comedies and stuff like that. And then I switched again to do social justice documentaries. And it sort of seemed a bit scattered, but the book actually is in some ways a culmination of all the three different genres I've worked in. Like I wrote the book as a poet, like paying attention to every word, imagery, all the basic building blocks of language. And I know I did a good job because my copy editor, who, in publishing, oftentimes they're known as the crankiest people. My copy editor actually wrote back and said, please tell Mr. Chin that this is an eye-opening, well-written, fascinating memoir. I really enjoyed reading it. I told all my other writer friends this, and they're like, what? My copy editor didn't say bullshit about my book. So I know that it was a well-written book. The comedy I added in from my TV days, even though the Washington Post called it cheesy comedy, it's okay. I'll take it.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
And then
Take
the
the
social
win.
justice, I'll take the win. It was a front page story, so I can't complain. A really
Right.
nice piece that they wrote. But then the social justice stuff, which matches the documentaries I do, I mean, that's obviously infused in it. And so in some ways, the memoir is a culmination of all these different genres I've worked in. So in that sense, I feel full circle, like in terms of my career for the last 20, 30 years, that, I can confidently say that I am a writer now. Whereas before, maybe I felt like a poser because I was hopping around a bit more, like still trying to find my voice. But at least now I have I have evidence. I have something that, regardless of what happens, I have this book.
Hmm.
All right. Well, I mean, I know this is a memoir, but if you were to write a book about any person in your life that you thought was interesting enough, do you have someone like that from your novel or from your memoir that you would think, oh, that could make an
Well,
interesting read as well?
so a big part of this book is my mom and her journey and my relationship with her. I mean, in some ways, right? It's about my whole family, but really my mom really emerges.
Hmm.
I think so one of the writing projects I'm working on now is a potential follow-up, a second memoir. And that one would be focused on my dad and his car accident and my relationship with him. So
Oh,
I
that
think
would be
that
wonderful. Okay, looking forward to that. All right. Well, have you ever traveled as research for your book?
for my book. I mean, travel, I came back to Detroit a lot. It's really set there. But I've also had the wonderful experience of just traveling in general, as an invited speaker. I know my bio said 616, but it's kind of old. So I think I'm close to 720 countries now.
Wow.
And I've just had this really wonderful life of being able to be invited to these different countries to engage in conversations with people. Um, I'm not the type who knows how to take vacations. Like, I don't know what vacations, weekends, and holidays are. I really don't. Like, I don't,
That's
you
probably
know,
again from the restaurant, you know.
Yeah.
yeah, I don't understand these concepts. But I learned to enjoy the things that I do and what I'm doing. And so I don't necessarily, people say like, oh, well, how do you navigate this work-life balance? And for me, I mean, work is life, but that's not necessarily a bad thing if you really enjoy what you do,
Right,
right?
exactly.
Mhm.
So
Exactly.
I don't,
Absolutely. All right.
yeah.
Well, finally, how do you celebrate when you finish the book?
How did I celebrate? Or
Hmm.
um I don't know. Did I celebrate? Did I even treat myself to anything?
Oh no. There are three flavors of ice cream you didn't treat yourself to?
No, I didn't. Uh, I'm guessing maybe I had a sushi dinner.
Yum.
No, I
Okay.
didn't. I didn't do anything. Yeah.
Well, see, when you get that next book written, put something on the calendar.
Yeah. Celebrate your
Okay.
accomplishments.
Someone's gonna have to teach me how to celebrate. Yeah. Yeah, like what I do, I throw a party. I'm like,
Well, yeah, whatever
oh,
works
you
for
know what I
you.
have been doing? I've been celebrating in small ways is that I've been treating my friends to dinner a lot more. Like
Nice.
Yeah,
because
that.
I have more income. So I
Yeah,
was like, oh, okay,
there you
I'll
go.
take this time. So that's what I do.
All
Yeah,
right,
I
all
like
right.
it.
I feel like I've loosened up a little bit on that. Yeah. Yeah.
Bravo. Well, you made it through the list. Bravo.
Hmm.
Thank you.
So I know you teased us with a potential second memoir. Are you working on anything else you want to share?
Yeah, I'm working on a screenplay because we do have hopes that maybe some producer would be interested in optioning this as a TV series. And so in order to attach myself as one of the writers for the project, I need to write something that is similar in tone because I don't have anything that would match the tone of this book. So I broke a screenplay that I'm waiting for notes from my producing partner and a couple friends. So it's between that and the second memoir. I'm sort of juggling the two of them on top of this mega tour that I'm on right now. I did 50 readings before the book came out, including 5 in Europe. And then the book came out October 17th. I did about 70 events between October and December. And this
Wow.
spring, probably have like a little over 100 events.
Do you keep a calendar of where you're appearing next on your website?
Yep, it's all on my website.
All right.
I
So folks, Curtis from Detroit, Curtis with a C. Um, and is there a social media where you're most active?
I posted pictures on Instagram of all the events. I just posted up the ones from Detroit this past weekend, and oh my
Nice.
God, it was so great, the homecoming. I'm so blessed that my home state has really embraced the book. Not only did the state announce that it's one of the notable books, they're gonna have a big ceremony in April, but like even like the local companies like Ford and GM are talking about like I'm working with them to organize these big events at their world headquarters, but like my alma mater, Michigan. It's just the state of Michigan and the city of Detroit has just really, really embraced the book, which has been really, really nice.
That's
I wrote it for
fantastic.
them. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really awesome. And you did. You wrote a slice of their history.
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly.
Nice. All right. Any final words of wisdom?
Um, well, I mean, in terms of your readers, I mean, your listeners, I would imagine there are a lot of people that want to write books. The one thing I say to people, who tell me that, I say, in these creative writing jobs, you're going to hear the word no a lot. Don't let that voice be your own. Like always say yes to yourself. If someone tells you no, you just got to figure out how to turn that no into a yes.
Mhm.
My career has been littered with people who first said no to me, but I just didn't give up. And I
Right,
eventually
right. No,
wore them down
absolutely.
and got them to say yes to me. So that's the one thing I would say.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right, folks, we'd like to extend a huge thank you to Curtis Chin for joining us today. Curtis, thank you so much.
Yeah, sure.
All right, we at Written on the Edge are proud to introduce you to new media by queer content creators. So if you like what you're hearing, like, subscribe, do all the bells and whistles. We'll see you back on the show. We were produced by Roll Ravens Media. We love you. We'll talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Oh, what's that? Closing time. The bums rush in melody, dear.